I was writing some JavaScript code today and planned on using one of my all-time favorite packages, Faker.js. I ran npm install and it installed version 6.6.6, but when I went to use it, I got an unexpected error message. I figured it was my fault and just the result of a breaking API change, so I went directly to the GitHub repo, but noticed that there was something weird going on here. All the source code was removed, and there was just one commit with a comment of endgame, and in the README, all it says is, what really happened to Aaron Swartz? That's actually a really good question. If you don't know who he is, he's an absolute legend who helped create RSS, or Really Simple Syndication, the Markdown format, the Creative Commons organization, and a website called Reddit. His contributions have a major impact on virtually every web developer out there. But there was one thing about Aaron that some people didn't like. You see, he thought information should be free for everybody, and he believed in that so much that he went into a storage closet on the MIT campus and downloaded a bunch of academic journals behind a paywall on JSTOR or journal storage. They caught him doing this on camera, and a few months later he was arrested. Journal storage, the victim in this case, was very reasonable, and instead of going to court, they just had him return all of the downloaded documents, which he did. The US Attorney's Office, though, wasn't nearly as understanding. He was charged with a whole bunch of different federal crimes like wire fraud and computer fraud, where he faced up to 50 years in prison. A while later, he was offered a deal by the feds, where he would only serve 6 months in prison if he pled guilty to 13 different crimes. Aaron, being the badass dude that he was, rejected this ridiculous deal and instead opted for a trial where the feds would actually have to justify their overzealous pursuit of him. That's the right thing to do if you believe in your cause, but it's also extremely risky. The feds have a reputation of railroading people to make an example out of them, like Ross Ulbricht of the Silk Road, who will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Unfortunately, in Aaron's case, it never went to trial because he would pass away by suicide on January 11th, 2013. It's extremely sad to lose such a talented programmer, especially one who wasn't motivated by money, but rather a higher purpose of making information free and accessible to everybody. He would likely be appalled by the censorship that we see in social media today, which includes the very website he created. Now, some people out there have speculated that there's more to the story than meets the eye. Back in 2011, he was contributing to a project called DeadDrop, which has since been renamed to SecureDrop. It's a project that allows whistleblowers to securely transmit documents to journalists. It's basically a platform where a media organization can create its own little WikiLeaks. What's interesting is that another founder of the project, James Dolan, also died by suicide a few years later in 2017. I'm not saying there's any connection there, but it is an interesting coincidence nonetheless, and it goes way deeper than anything I can talk about on this channel without being censored. But now let's get back to our original question. What happened to Faker.js? If you're not familiar with it, it's a very popular library with over 1 million weekly downloads that is used to create random fake data, like names, phone numbers, addresses, and so on. I use it all the time when building demos for this channel. It's maintained by a GitHub user named Maroc, whose avatar is a mugshot of Bill Gates. I decided to sponsor them on GitHub because a lot of open source creators out there get screwed. They spend countless hours working on these very useful libraries that get used by all kinds of Fortune 500 companies without any compensation whatsoever. I did a little more digging and found that this user had warned us about this back in November of 2020. Respectfully, I am no longer going to support Fortune 500s with my free work. There isn't much else to say. Take this opportunity to send me a 6-figure yearly contract or fork the project and have someone else work on it. The response on this issue was extremely positive. The sad thing is that for open source to be viable, you need to go at it as an entrepreneur or be hired by a big company to make it worthwhile. And unfortunately, that doesn't work for everybody. I did a little more digging and found that right before this post, he tweeted the following: "I lost all my stuff in an apartment fire and am barely staying unhomeless. Lost access to most of my accounts. All precious metal is missing. A little cash would help me from freezing in the street. LOL." I mean, that's pretty messed up. You would think a library that generates as many downloads as Vue.js would at least generate enough income to support the creator, but that's just not the way the open source world works. I think the moral of the story is that maybe you should think twice about spending your time on open source unless you have a business plan or you're being paid a comfortable salary to do it. Otherwise, you might find yourself making your own endgame commit.